Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We're taking a quick look here at some on-chain data today. I highly recommend sticking around because we're going to talk about why $2.6 billion in Bitcoin has been sold in the last 5 trading days and cycling back into Ethereum. Almost a 1-to-1 ratio. We got 2.2 billion flowing right back into Ethereum. There are 2 large entities essentially doing this. Okay, so we're going to talk about that and obviously a handful of other important factors, specifically Ethereum Bitcoin dominance and a macro structure here that I think is worth noting for both Bitcoin and altcoins alike. I think we're in pretty good shape here. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we get started, always try to go on the lighter side here and discuss really quick some polls here that I sent out earlier today. So roughly an hour ago, I sent out a poll asking what's next for Bitcoin, 116,106 or sub 100K. We're looking at about 55% of you, 54 roughly, so far on Twitter are effectively more so bullish, expecting a recovery here. Crypto YouTube is a little bit on the different side here. We can see about 47%, slightly larger amount of you are thinking 106K is the next step. I personally don't think leaning more towards further upside or more so just going sideways here. And we'll talk about why I think that, but I think altcoins are going to be super strong here soon. So let's jump into the meat and potatoes here. First of all, when it comes to rotating from Bitcoin to Ethereum, if you're not familiar, there's essentially 2 large whales that have been very manipulative in selling. We don't know who they are, but obviously they're selling Bitcoin at an extreme rate. So somebody apparently sold a significant amount, about 2 billion in Bitcoin over the last 5 trading days, and they're cycling it back into Ethereum. So they're basically buying Ethereum at a significantly lower price point. What do you know? They sell a ton and then buy the dip, and they're effectively at about 2.2 billion in spot. So they are heavy on basically longing Ethereum. So that's a good sign there. That does imply Ethereum should be moving towards further upside. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right away, but big picture, if these large whales are cycling money from one coin to another, it does kind of spell altcoin season, for lack of better terms. So all this information I can go ahead and provide on my Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. Feel free to request that if you'd like. Otherwise, feel free to reference these links here. So what I want to talk about, of course, to start here is dominance, and just kind of recognize Bitcoin dominance on the top left here is effectively pulling back. Big surprise. It was increasing yesterday with significant momentum. And then, of course, here today, we're seeing Ethereum increase in value, and altcoins are kind of lagging behind, but they're not pulling back super hard. And that's the good thing. Even though Bitcoin's pulling back right now, we're in this cycle right now where money's flowing away from stablecoin, or going into stablecoin and away from Bitcoin and flowing into altcoins. So it's kind of the reverse of what we saw yesterday. So that's generally a favorable sign. Now, how long does this last? It's hard to say specifically, but I do think Bitcoin is coming up to its tentative bottom. And what I mean by that here is we looked at this yesterday with our weekly time frame, and the fact that we had previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 weeks in a row, basically the entire month of June and May, essentially where the price could not cross 109,000, or you could even round up and say 110 is an easy round number. Right now we're testing that level, so the likelihood of that holding is fairly high, considering this is basically construed as a bullish back test of a horizontal trend, or in this case, a resistance turn support. So that's kind of where we're at there. Our super trend's looking good. Macro's okay. So I think we should stop trying to run for the hills. I'm sure there's tons of other influencers out there. That's probably why we can see crypto YouTube a little bit more on the bearish side, because a lot of folks are concerned at this point based on the fear mongering that they're probably hearing. So I would try not to attach yourself to that. 99% will lose and all this crazy fear tactics just to get the views. While I am creative with my thumbnails a little more so recently, you've probably noticed that. I'm always going to shoot you straight in the videos and try not to give you any kind of personal bias, just for my own benefit. Truthfully, this is for you, and I hope that you can learn and benefit from it. Taking a look here at CME gaps. Far left-hand side, the only relevant one here is that we have a CME gap in the range of roughly 114 to 117,000 for Bitcoin. So just know that that exists. That's still there. That's why we have slightly more propensity for the price to increase. Moving forward, quickly to look here at altcoin season index. I just want to touch on this here. We're at 44. Our crypto market cap for altcoins is at 1.6 plus trillion. That's a good sign. That's very good. Anything over 1.5, in my personal opinion, is still very good for altcoins. Now, obviously, it depends on which altcoins you're investing in. A lot of them got hit pretty hard here recently. But for the most part, we can see there's a basically just a good consistency here. And even though we had a significant sell-off yesterday for a lot of altcoins, today they're maintaining their range. They're doing fairly well, even though Bitcoin is still technically establishing lower lows and lower highs. But if you look here, you can see how massively overextended Bitcoin is. That is quite a significant continuation. We should have stopped at 110 to 112,000, but it keeps on going. There's that natural precipitation that occurs when the bottom drops out. It's just like price discovery almost in a lot of ways when you hit all-time highs, except in this case, we have a lot of support levels below us, so we should start seeing some selling pressures or some buying pressure soon, and more importantly, a decrease in selling pressure. 108.5 thousand as of yesterday was that significant area of liquidation here for us with Bitcoin. So let's take a quick look here. I basically update these charts about 10 minutes before I upload this or start the video here. So let's go ahead and see where we're at with some important levels here. First of all, for Bitcoin, I'm kind of zoomed in here a little bit. This last 7 days worth of open interest, but we have a lot of resistance at 114.6. We discussed that previously. That was that previous high that should have worked as a new low, but didn't because we saw somewhere in the range of $2 billion sold on Bitcoin in a very, very short amount of time. That will tend to break through support levels. All right, anyways, 114.6, try to remember that number. That's a likely resistance for us. So once we're traveling into the 115K range, we're probably going to see some slowing pressure. More importantly, exit liquidity in that 115K range. When we look here at liquidation short delta, we're at 2 billion. That is 20 billion. That is a fairly large overextension. Now, I don't like to see that in most cases, but it's awesome in this sense here when the price is pulling back and the likelihood of the price recovering is higher. It's just I wouldn't expect a monumental push to the upside. But take a look at this here. This is funny. 108. I mentioned this to my community. 108.5K yesterday was that level to essentially get fully swept. What do you know? We saw one last candle wick down to destroy $2 billion in liquidation there for some kind of long position that got fully swept there. So it is uncanny how professional these market makers are. And keep in mind, folks, market makers aren't just whales, they're likely the exchanges too. Now, they're the ones that see all this data, they have that level 2 data, they know what's going on, they can find these levels pretty quick. So the only advantage we have is to essentially understand roughly where those levels are at. At this point, there's just a little bit left at 108K, but these are not significantly large levels. So I think a slow recovery would make a little bit more sense here moving forward. The one thing that is kind of contradictory here, or not phenomenal, is the amount of open interest delta. We're at 5%. That's pretty low. We need that number to be 20, 30, 40% or higher to feel confident in taking it along, at least with this coin itself. So to me personally, when we see that and we see true retail longs at a delta of about 98%, these are like the worst case scenarios for trying to take a long into it. Okay, so hypothetically, you do take a long, please understand it's a very high risk consideration. So just because I'm slightly more biased towards altcoins doing well right now doesn't mean Bitcoin's going to instantly recover. The key here is that altcoins are going up and Bitcoin's going down right now. That's something you need to recognize and try to consider buying into, or more importantly, just average into your position. Try not to get too out of control here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the front end on Bitcoin and see what's going on. Daily time frame is still very bearish. Really, majority of coins we're going to look at today, if not most all coins, they're still mostly going to be bearish on the daily time frame, right? And once more, we got that confluence at 116,000 with both moving averages. And if we take a look here, we can recognize that all these signs here down below, basically stochastic, money flow index, RSIs, they're all bearish, okay? Now, it's not to say that we can't bounce or recover from here, but those are not really conditions you want to take a long position into. We're also in a descending trend line here too, running fairly consistent with the 20-day SMA on the 4-hour. I generally value being above that level in order to feel confident in taking a long, okay? So at this point, once more, if we do surpass our previous all-time high here, roughly 112,000, that's our initial barrier. 114.6 is that next level. That is essentially where we saw some confluence. That's this guy right here, 114.6. I'll post this on our Twitter, Telegram, and Discord so you can kind of see it, but this is that rough estimate, that 0.68 fib level with confirming previous high factors. In other words, that's it's going to be our secondary area there because once again, open interest is also very high there. So once more, we got fib levels, we got a previous high, and we also got open interest. You all add that all together, that's called confluence. It's not a magical Elliott wave theory, right? Please understand, the more lines that you see on the charts that kind of line up together, more consistent tools, trading tools, when they all line up together, there's something to it, okay? So once more, be prepared for some exit liquidity at 115,000 approximately. Let's move on to Ethereum, see what's going on with the back end here. This is another interesting one. Let's actually go ahead and refresh this guy. And just to clarify on Ethereum, this coin, once more, just had about $2 billion cycled into it at 4,400. And we take a look here, we can see open interest. What do you know? 43.78, roughly 4,400, that massive amount of open interest. That's probably where these whales are accumulating. Right about 4,500 as well here locally. So 4,500 does appear to be a potential support level for us. So let's take a quick look here and recognize kind of where we're at, and just understand that there's also a secondary area at about 4,300. So the easy way to remember it here, these are kind of close to round numbers just below. 4,300, 4,400, and 4,500 are those three key level supports for Ethereum. Moving on here, liquidation long delta is not present. We are still 10 billion in short liquidation, implying that shorts could have a bad day here soon. And we take a look as well at the big picture. There's still a lot of liquidation below the price, as low as about 4,100. But my speculation is now that these whales are starting to accumulate in those ranges, specifically 43, 44, and 4,500, the odds of 4,100 or 4,200 is very, very low. So once more, it will require Bitcoin to continue to sell off pretty hard. If we do lose this 108K rough estimate of support for Bitcoin, then there's more likelihood of going lower. But keep in mind, from a macro perspective, Bitcoin does have a lot of volume below the price, and we're gonna make sure to pay attention to that. Okay. So taking a look here at the front end for Ethereum daily time frame, I want to double check a couple of things here. First of all, we take a look at the daily time frame. We're still honoring our ascending trend. It's running consistent with our type of ascending trend line, which is very good. We're still over 50 on the RSI, while money flow index is tapering off, and we're still under our RSI SMA. We can see that for the most part, we're still in decent shape. Now, I don't want to try to fool you here and tell you that everything's looking fully bearish. It's not the truth at all. In fact, when we look at the MACD and stochastic, they're both momentous indicators telling us we have momentum to the downside. So that is generally not construed as a positive or bullish sign, right? Again, I'm always going to shoot you straight, but in that sense, outside of those outliers, we're looking fairly decent for a potential reversal. Now, we haven't reversed officially. We're not over 50 in the RSI. That's usually a sign I like to look for when taking a long position. Furthermore, too, we are honoring our ascending trend. We're still over a 50-day SMA, but we still haven't surpassed the 20-day SMA, nor have we gotten past our local high here of roughly 45.60. So we're going to need to see more volume to flow in order to break through those levels. But the overall sentiment here is that Ethereum, I feel, is going to be pretty well bullish in the relative near future, because just say Bitcoin starts to trend towards 112, 114.6K. I think Ethereum is going to be doing pretty well by then based on how well it's performing already. It has filled the majority of its local fair value gap. So me personally, I'm bullish on Ethereum just in the overall sense based on a lot of those back-end things here that not everyone can see or not everyone pays attention to. So, but me personally, when money flows away from Bitcoin, specifically large amounts like that, and goes into Ethereum, that gives me a bit of a bullish bias towards those things. We also have a majority confirming factors here in the present on the time frame presently at this point. So you make the call. Why don't you comment below? Let me know if you are bullish on Ethereum. All right, let's move on to Solana. Is going on here for Solana. Daily time frame is it's been bullish, honestly. For lack of better terms, I know once again the SMAs are good, but the RSI, everything, we do see some slight divergences here with money flow index coming down. You just got to recognize that most coins have been selling off a lot harder than they should have recently, so that's not really the best indicator. So be careful with those MFIs. If you are getting, some false positives on some of your indicators. I know some folks use Market Cipher, if I'm not mistaken. That one has MFI built into it. You want to understand how MFI works before you use it, specifically even in that indicator, right? It's probably going to highlight you with like a green or a red asterisk or something. But the key here is that you got to treat money flow index with the conditions that we're in. Significant selling pressure like this will skew the money flow index, so it will essentially give you kind of a bearish sign when it could actually be bullish, because we have other moving averages and other things confirming that. All right, now let's double check and make sure that that is the case. I'm not just proposing that that is the situation, but for Solana, you got to recognize a ton of open interest above the price. So 195 to 210, just say round number 200 to 210. Significant amount of resistance. So we're going to need to see a lot of volume to break through that level. We obviously had a lot of resistance here recently. It's basically a double top. We see 2 billion in liquidation short delta, which is also a bearish sign. And once more, we look at liquidation here. There's a little bit left above and below, 196 and 185 below, or sorry, 180 below. So really, when we look at these things here, I don't feel super enthused about taking along into a key level resistance that's proven to be a pretty strong resistance range. And also, just the fact of the matter is, even though the daily time frame looks pretty decent, once more, macro is okay. On the short term, we still haven't broken through any of these key levels here. We did, however, bounce off 30 on the money flow index. That's a really good sign in most cases when MFI becomes overextended. Once more, MFI is a little more trustworthy on lower time frames. We can see here that that could be a good pivot consideration. Okay. Once more, though, we got a 0.618 fib level there. Our local high sort of working as a new low. Point of control at 187. We got a good amount of support at the 185 to 187. So to me, those margins are a little too tight. I don't really like breakout trading personally, but if you're going to consider a trade, we do have slightly more favorable signs on the charts to imply that 200 to 210 will be the likely next area for Solana. Just recognize though that this isn't like super favorable. There's not like a tremendous amount of bullish confirming factors. Let's move on to SUI and kind of see what's going on here. Back-end data for SUI is as follows: 380 for our local resistance, and once more 350. That's kind of the newer open interest area there. Furthermore, liquidation short delta is still high. Most coins are going to reflect that same behavior. If we do take a look at liquidation, there's still a lot left to the downside. So I personally don't trust taking along with this coin just based on very little liquidation on the upside. Everything is still fairly well bearish here. So while altcoins are doing well, SUI is not doing so good. It hasn't recovered very well. It has established a lower low already too, and those are usually signs that it's hard to trust that. Okay, daily time frame is still bearish. We've been bearish for a while. We have some support with our 0.272 fib extension, about 313. So I'd say the low $3 range is a solid area to consider a long position. Between now and then, I think you just want to avoid trading this coin. We have some resistance above the price. That 350 to 360 range is significant. So if we get lucky and see 350 again, I'm going to be leaning more towards a short position. Once more, I'm going to evaluate and see how Bitcoin is doing at that time. I'm not just going to take a short in the blind. But for the lack of better terms right now, everything's pointing down for SUI, and it's not really a good long consideration. Let's take a look here at Chainlink and kind of see where we're at here for Chainlink. And just to clarify, we have this coin is one of the few coins that has a lot of open interest in its current range. Just know that this $25 range is the current resistance for Chainlink. I mentioned yesterday that would be a solid consideration for a short position. Let's see if that's still a viability. But between now and then, 25, a lot of resistance there and / exit liquidity for those short positions. Taking a look here at liquidation long delta, it's not present. We are still short. We have more shorts than longs, of course. Most coins, once more, are going to show that. And then we don't have a lot of liquidation left to the upside, so there's less incentive for the whales to push the price action higher. I do foresee 2250 in the relative near future if Bitcoin continues to progress lower. So just keep that in mind. Chainlink does look like it's broke its little structure here. You can kind of see somewhat of a rising wedge here, basically breaking down pretty hard. So oftentimes you want to short into that retest if the price does come up to 26. This would be an excellent area. So 25 to 26 would be a good range for a short based on the point of control, bearish backtest of the ascending trend line, and just once more that open interest range above the price. So I'm just going to go ahead and set an alert here at about 25, somewhere in that range. Here, let's go ahead and do that. 25. All right, cool. So let's move on to XRP and see kind of where we're at there. Let's double check a few things. You can see somewhat of a descending trend here. I'm just going to pull this up. It's kind of running fairly consistent with these moving averages here. Let's go ahead and look at the back end really quick for XRP and kind of see where we're at. And just clarify too, with XRP, this coin has it's a unique one because we got that $3 resistance wall, 3 to 303, and with us being below that, it's safe to presume that that's going to be the new resistance because once more, it was like a key level support for quite a long time. So try not to get too ahead of yourselves. I know my XRP traders and unfortunately other influencers out there are just permanently bullish on this coin. But until a fundamental catalyst occurs, it's running fairly consistent with Bitcoin in a lot of ways. Once more, there's that 330 resistance, 320 and 310. Those have dissipated some, but we do have a lot of open interest between 310 and 330. So that's a resistance range. We can see short liquidation delta is still present. So we have more people shorting than taking longs. And then obviously we take a look at liquidation here. There's a little bit left upwards of $3. So if we see a retest at $3, once more, good consideration for a short on XRP. Now I know it's like, wait, you're probably like rolling your eyes. Wait a minute, you said earlier in the video that you're bullish on altcoins. Yeah, you can be bullish on altcoins, just not every altcoin. And for heaven forbid, you're going to be bullish on this coin because you're emotionally invested and you have a large bag. That is so stupid. Sorry, just calling it how it is. I'm always going to shoot you straight and tell you my thoughts and my honest opinion. And XRP, regardless of how stupid most people are about it, it doesn't have any super, awesome trends here. There's nothing that's like, oh, we got a hidden bullish convergence. You got to take a long right now because, some Tom, Dick, and Harry online that knows nothing about trading, by the way, is promoting XRP. Yeah. Anyways, I could probably make a full-length video talking about how stupid and ridiculous it is. Once more, I'm not bashing you or your favorite coin. If you're taking offense, then you're probably in the wrong place. More importantly, you're probably an emotional trader, and that's essentially just, it doesn't belong. Those two things don't go together, emotions and trading. So let's take a look here. Still under 50 on the RSI. Money flow index is tapering off. Not a lot of good stuff here on the daily time frame. Once again, nothing super awesome. We do got to recognize, though, that we do have a local bottom here. We bottomed out about 275 roughly. Okay. Now, again, I can clean up the charts on the macro here for us a little bit better, but the general consensus is that we have more propensity to go a bit further down. Now, when we do take a look at the 4-hour time frame, we're still under all moving averages. We're still in this descending trend line. We are testing 50 on the RSI. So I think that, XRP being XRP, it'll probably run towards $3. That makes perfect sense. But breaking through that point of control here, we can see if we zoom out, we have the most amount of volume on this coin at $3 even. And the main reason why we see that is because that's a psychological support and resistance. In case you didn't know this in trading, Bitcoin, $100,000, Ethereum, 5,000, for example. Like any round number is going to be a place in which you're going to see a lot of resistance or support because it's just a place that people feel like they're going to want to average in or out. Okay, so $3 is that range there. So the most people that are underwater in a $3 position right now, they're going to want to get out when we hit that $3 again. That's why the price will reject or could reject hypothetically. Anyways, the whole point of this here is that there's still way more bearish divergences, and I don't recommend taking along with this coin just yet. If we get closer to $3 and the price goes a little bit higher, I would recommend considering securing some profits and try not to be a super greedy trader. Okay, greed doesn't belong in this market, folks. You want to buy the fear and sell the greed, basically. And at this point, we're in that neutral transition for the overall market with fear and greed index. Anyways, that's kind of where I hope you found benefit here today. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow. Join us over at BitUnix2, phenomenal exchange, no KYC or VPN required. I'm going to be partnering with a new exchange at the beginning of the month to provide more options for my traders. It'll be a nice little deposit, I think, reward bonus. It's going to be a good one. I'm also probably going to consider utilizing my my trade signals as a bit of incentive. We'll talk more about that later. I hope you have a good rest of your day, though. Thank you again so much for being an awesome part of my life. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. You take care of yourself out there. Bye-bye.